video is brought to you by Curiosity Stream. Last year, in June of 2020, federal prosecutors announced criminal charges against 6 former high-ranking bosses and a contractor of eBay. It was because they were orchestrating a cyberstalking and harassment campaign. The bosses would hire the contractors to rent a car, live out of a hotel, and follow this couple around for blocks. They would mail them packages of spiders and flies and books on how to cope with the loss of loved ones. The reason this couple attracted so much attention and hatred is because they wrote an eBay Tips newsletter, whose criticism and tricks were cutting into the company's bottom line. One of those bosses has already been sentenced for 18 months, another is still awaiting trial. They all got to resign with millions of dollars in severance packages. Despite doing the crime and the time for it, they're still gonna be better off than the rest of us. And I just wanted to point that out before talking about the science fiction dystopia computer game where you play as a thug hired to do violence on behalf of the Fortune 500s. Cruelty Squad, the morbid cynicism pointed square at our boring dystopias right there in the name of the game. It's like something you'd see as a Simpsons parody of a game, a Grand Theft Auto parody of a game. This is what the neurons in your grandmother's brain were envisioning in the 90s when picturing a game. It's a Hotline Miami-style takedown of video game violence while gratuitously indulging in video game violence. It's just being a little honest about how ugly, guilty, and dark all this is. It's one of the few games to exactly mathematically calculate just how low the value of human life is once a human life is depicted as an obstacle in the player's path of a video game. As the cost of human life is so low, some have adopted these animal control pistols instead. That's how it presents the token non-lethal options, like the tranquilizer dart gun. I never really managed to get it to work though. But non-lethal options in an FPS game, that must mean this is some kind of stealth game, right? Kinda, yeah. It's like a combination of Hitman and Quake. You're tasked to infiltrate into levels that are full of mostly peaceful civilian NPCs who are herded around by the hostile guards you actually want to worry about. They shoot to kill once you're spotted, and they do not give a damn about who's in between you and them. But before things get that hairy and violent, and frankly kinda unpredictable, you'll be getting your thrills from exploring non-linear open-ended levels via the delicious digital consumption of a virtual world. The Quake comparison, on the other hand, comes from its sense of movement, and it's gonna draw a hard line between players who know about bunny hopping and those who don't. In my case, the gameplay didn't really click at all until I started bunny hopping. The levels felt too big and your movement felt too slow until I started working out that muscle memory of diagonal hops. But very quick deaths coming from very lethal firearms from usually unexpected angles with no quick saves to exploit your way through are gonna necessitate caution and therefore delicate tactics. I don't know if I'd categorize Cruelty Squad as a run-and-gun boomer shooter. I think I'd file it more under the tactical shooter umbrella. Cruelty Squad is a game about being a corporate liquidations expert who's hired to, retire business leaders who are ahead in the competition, business leaders who turned out to be a bad investment, business leaders who didn't pay their rent, and business leaders who did pay their taxes. It's the cathartic scream of an underemployed, tortured soul who might have had some kind of traumatizing childhood experience vomiting up Skittles. We get to explore what that guy's mind is like thanks to our friends at Consumer Soft Products. Consumer Soft Products is the game development studio name chosen by Vil Kallio, an artist based out of Finland who's made paintings, drawings, sculptures, installations, experimental short films, and now one video game. And even as ugly and harsh and like literally borderline painful as it can be if the rest of your room is dark enough while you're staring into this abyss, within seconds of showing it to an art school friend of mine, I was told that whoever was behind this aesthetic mess really did actually know what they were doing. What's going on here visually is that many rules they teach you in art school are being deliberately broken, one by one, each a reversal of what the experts say are gonna sell units. Everything from text size to which parts of the screen are supposed to be used to what kinds of icons are supposed to be used, all the way to even how long subtitles are supposed to stay on the screen, and of course the color theory going on here is picking deliberate opposites all over the place as well. But scroll down Vil Kallio's Instagram far enough and you kinda do get that dissonance of what it's like comparing the earlier to the later Picassos. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. It's more like Peter Saul, or actually way more like the Von Bode comics they'd put in National Lampoon back in the 70s when it was all anti-war and edgy. Believe it or not, there is a degree of craftsmanship being shown off in this kind of visual style. It comes from a history of counterculture cartooning. And its flavor text, dialogue, and mission descriptions are written with the ruthlessly blunt wit of today's extremely online counterculture call-outs. It shows that there's a common ancestor connecting punk art of the 70s with deep-fried shitposting today. All of this game's nihilism would just be nihilism if there wasn't such extremism attached to it. The author's failure to appreciate conventional society and their willingness to put on such a show about that belies, in fact, a passionate and informed call to change conventional society during times where conventional society is facing seemingly apocalyptic decline. Some of that cultural glue connecting punk art from the 70s to Cruelty Squad today are drill tweets that the game's writing style shows a gleeful love for. I really look up to people who are good at violence. I fucked up my last job, got a bunch of civilians killed, got paid, but I feel super bad. But as a piece of interactive software rather than a splattery painting on a wall or a scribbly underground comics on the back pages of a 70s magazine, Kalio's interactive electronic obtrusive art gets to tell some of its story through the audience overcoming a learning curve. Which brings me to how deliberately bizarre the icon choices are. Clicking the wrong button in these menus isn't going to carry too heavy of a penalty. It kind of just makes you feel like a kid playing DOS games without a fully developed vocabulary yet. You just kind of start out by clicking on stuff to see what happens, and a more readable coherency eventually trickles from experiencing all the surprises of which buttons do which functions. As for the stuff that happens after a level loads, it is an absolute mess to look at least in screenshots and videos, but I swear it's not so bad when it's blown up fully in front of your face with yourself in the driver's seat. If you can understand how actually having your hands on a controller playing something like Bayonetta is going to make this crazy light show on the screen feel comprehensible, then you should be able to understand how once you are holding the controls and climbing that learning curve of Cruelty Squad, all the trash on the screen will quickly become valuable, immediately readable feedback. When it's zoomed in front of your face in an HD resolution on a big monitor, your eyeballs are not really going to be focusing on stuff like the big ugly border across the screen, which you might actually not notice change for some gameplay reasons I only want to pique your curiosity over. The big ugly heartbeat health meter just kind of makes it easy to keep track of how dead you are in your peripheral vision. The game's tactical combat will either leave you perfectly alive or perfectly dead, so it's not like the gradations in between matter much. The intense nonsense architecture means that every corner is its own interesting, memorable landmark. It weirdly gives the level design a good sense of direction and memorization. Your brain is not going to forget these layouts unless getting lost in the layout is the deliberate idea. It's like a purposefully obtuse Duke Nukem 3D. It's full of these realistic, everyday locations that are washed over with the lo-fi surreal cynicism. A shop in the mall is just called Punishment, with absolutely nothing inside. Rooms covered from ceiling to floor in smiling gorilla faces. There's a suburban cul-de-sac of mechanical checkerboard and ground beef textured glass houses. There is a kind of beauty going on to this ugliness. It is elegant in its incorrectness. And since my preferences in games are always going to steer towards the weird and the wonderful, towards personal projects where even the game feel carries a message and all the old rules are gleefully being broken, then Cruelty Squad ticks all those boxes. It transcends the joke game first impressions. It is not a joke game, it's a great game. One of the coolest visual tricks happens in this swamp level, where a short foggy draw distance and a full bright lighting error will make this big triangular exit sign you're guided towards, something your eyes are definitely going to want to keep focusing on as you move forward, will appear in front of geometry it's actually placed behind of. But the one area where I don't know if deliberately breaking all the rules to a rhythmic harmony doesn't work is in the music. Kalio's experience with a lot of art forms, paintings, sculptures, installations, experimental short films, but not music. And we can kinda tell. But I can't say it doesn't fit. If anything, the soundtrack has personality. It definitely sounds like VGA DOS games from the 90s slung through the sewage as it should. I just don't know if it has the craftsmanship behind it like the visual art does. Maybe there should be a lot more layers of instruments going on here if the abrasiveness of the noise is supposed to be making some kind of greater point. Because the elegance in Cruelty Squad's incorrectness is so much more than just skin deep to make a point. The developers' frustrated screams can be heard echoing behind every single line of flavor text, depicting a hyper-dystopic future where the sole purpose of life is to secure bigger and bigger loans so that one day in your elder years you can maybe be able to afford the entire damn fortune it costs to not be a target of all the corporate assassination, liquidations going on. In the Cruelty Squadiverse, it's just kinda normal to get killed by your boss if you're not grinding hard enough. This is a world where murder is punishable by fine. The police are a corporation paid off by other corporations, and everyone's intimately aware with the dollar value of their individual body parts and how feasibly they could go on to keep working without them. You play as a possibly hallucinating hitman who used to work for the Security Exchange Commission's Death Squad before going to the private sector to do violence gigs for the Cruelty Squad's various subsidiaries and holdings. Become a leader, attain meaning, achieve an executive mindset, debuff your shit life, and level up to financial independence by investing all your death savings in Chunko Pops and augmented reusable kidneys so that one day the value of everyone else's lives you're taking will be able to add up to a slightly reliable dice roll chance at home ownership. The cheapest house on this list is, gonna take multiple playthroughs of hundreds of paid murdering to afford. But it's not just paid murdering that gets you there. Invest smartly and you too could maybe have a chance at living okay. Cruelty Squad is not over when the credits roll. A long list of secret levels and optional difficulty modes and unlockable game-changing abilities and gadgets make earning that dough far more fun for you than the profitable collateral damage on the other end of your guns. Partially thanks to a dynamic in-game economic meta layer that commodifies your violent actions based on the supply and demand of an actual in-game stock market. During occasional moments of downtime between listening to the screams of your enemies and the screams of the music or the screams of catches from the actually fully implemented fishing minigame, you'll be buying low and selling high on the in-game stock market. That slightly reliable dice roll chance at living a peaceful, placid life in your elder years isn't actually going to get paid for by you doing work for your boss. No, you gotta invest. And I actually don't know if I'm really the one who did this as a player character with agency, but one of these companies' stock prices definitely flatlined after I ate their board of directors. Oh, by the way, there's a cannibalism button. Press the use button on a corpse and they explode into a pile of goop that gives you a single HP point, which, since it's a tactical shooter with quick deaths, is actually very valuable. There are not many other ways to heal. This, ironically, horrifically, makes dead civilians who are gleefully zigzagging into the lines of gunfights a health bonus. Speaking of this incredibly dark sense of body horror going on and how much emphasis is made on the gross goop circulating inside you, did you know one of the Ubisoft bosses who resigned after the big sexual harassment scandals allegedly fed their staff marijuana edibles without telling them? Again, this guy wasn't fired, he just resigned. I just wanted to point that out before talking about the in-game organ trading market. Any corpse's gibbed pile of cannibalized goop will also net you a neat little portfolio of organs you can sell on a dynamic in-game market system that always seems to start ticking downwards once I acquire a nice big bag of all the best spleens, and my god, the worst part of it is just how satisfying it still feels to hold that use button down and vacuum up a bunch of loot numbers when this is the actual context of what you're doing. This even more morbidly, more ironically, more horrifically makes dead civilians who zigzag into your gunfights a long-term financial investment opportunity, despite the short-term civilians loss penalty deducted from your commission fee. Whoever dreamed up this absolute nightmare has one of the most horrific visions of a corporate dystopic future swirling through their heads than does any other artist alive in our times. They also have the stinging bile of body horror stewing in their gut. Cruelty Squad has you trafficking organs and transforming into Cronenbergs and scooping out your soldiers' brain matter to make room to carry more bullets. The metaphors are not too complicated to figure out. They are uncomfortable in their simplicity, and they even maintain a healthy degree of black humor. So despite everything, this absolute nightmare is not too cynical and hopeless. Work hard to unlock a double jump feature that greatly speeds things up and opens levels of verticality up and makes bunny hopping so much faster, and the flavor text calls it the gunk boosters. And the visual text is, it's you pooping yourself into the air.
That's... okay. He's shitting himself.
It's beautiful. I'm gonna be honest, this is what I have been basically visualizing and hearing in my head throughout a whole lifetime of watching video game characters double jump for like no good reason at all, and finally that vision is being tapped! Cruelty Squad is the most honest and intense reckoning of what FPS cliches represent than we've had in years. The emotion is more raw, the teeth are sharper than what you get from an overproduced AAA violence is bad violence game that doesn't even have you crunching the numbers of how valuable every enemy's kidneys are gonna be, assuming that you will peak the market from a sudden surge in demand for people's kidneys. It's really this kind of looting system in particular that just has me so morbidly fascinated. Like this is how you prove that there's so much more to video games than just the math of the systems and the usability of the software simulation and how good the incredibly repetitive combat needs to feel. Call a loot system organs, make it look like organs, make them spill out of dead people's bodies like organs, convert them into currency via a menu that looks like a stock market, and suddenly those same mechanics are telling a different, darker story than they would have otherwise. And, maybe it's a much more honest one about what you do in these games too. So the game deliberately leaning into a garbage aesthetic is not just a joke after all, which is why the Curiosity Stream documentary I want to recommend this time is Bag It, an award-winning, highly reviewed Michael Moore-style takedown where a quirky host uses a lot of sarcastic humor to explore what all the plastic garbage we produce does to us, and also follows all the garbage to its inevitably devastating destinations. That's on curiositystream.com/superbunnyhop, where they got thousands of titles of good educational documentaries made by good educational institutions. Documentaries that do not shy away from the less flattering consequences of our decadent modern lifestyle. Curiosity Stream also comes bundled with Nebula, a place we've built for educational YouTubers to try out new ideas and fund original videos that don't depend on a monetization algorithm that's constantly changing its rules. So you get educational YouTubers doing more specialized topics like the urban planning of ancient Rome and how gross the human body is. So once again, that's curiositystream.com/superbunnyhop for a 26% discount on annual plans that comes out to under $15 a year with Nebula bundled for free. Once again, that's curiositystream.com/superbunnyhop.